Welcome back. Today, licensed financial professional Lisara Camposano joins us for a discussion on generational wealth and what that looks like in the Bronx. Lisara, thank you so much for joining us.
It's my pleasure.
So, can you just start off by telling us a little bit about your background working as a financial educator?
Absolutely. So I've been a financial educator for a little over 3 years now. I'm actually born and raised in the South Bronx. So one of the things that motivated me to get started in this industry it was to not only just have the resources to be able to help myself and my loved ones, but at the same time help others in my community as well.
So, as many of us probably know, the Bronx has some of the poorest congressional districts in the country. In what ways do you think the pandemic has heightened that problem?
So as we know, the pandemic brought a wave of unemployment to our nation, especially to our country per se. We had over 46 million people that applied for unemployment. But if we actually look at, the US Bureau of Labor Statistics, we see that the Black workers had an unemployment rate of 13% compared to their white counterparts who were at 7%, right? So this just goes to show us in itself that our communities didn't have jobs, which means that bills were left behind, and the money that they did have saved up were just going for basic necessities. So this buttoned the wealth gap in our nation entirely.
And you kind of hinted at it a little bit already, but many have found that this is not just a regional concern, but race plays a huge part in these disparities. Can you explain why we see this, particularly in Black and Brown communities?
Yes, statistically speaking, the Rand Corporation has a research study that talks about how the Black community, the Black and Brown communities, take an average of 10 years to get back on track on the income that they had prior of recession. So if we're talking about the last recession that we had in that was between 2007 to 2009, and then in 2019 we had another recession. So right when people were getting back on track, they were hit with the pandemic, right? So it kind of set them back. So it takes them much longer to get back to the wealth or on track to creating that wealth than it does for their counterparts. So this is why we see a lot of these disparities in our communities, because of just the income levels and everything else that it plays a factor into that.
So you mentioned, that before financial literacy is very important to you. And as somebody who identifies as Latina, why was it crucial for you to understand the world of finance?
It's actually a great question. For me, personal finance allows me to see the world. Understand money allows me to see the world in a different perspective. I see it full of possibilities, and those possibilities allow me to bring more opportunities and help my community, which in then allows other people that look like me, right, other people of color, to see that they can also do the same. So to me, it's not just about me; it's about us as a community.
So the pandemic highlighted the economic disparities that we have in our community. Do you think it also made people more aware of the issues many of us were already facing?
Absolutely. It definitely made people more aware because now it hit home, right? We're talking about over 46 million people that apply for unemployment, and a lot of people were not working. And whether you were working or you knew of somebody who wasn't, right? And especially because of our communities, underserved communities were impacted the most. I believe that it made people more aware of these things, and it says, well, now I really have to get prepared, right? We don't plan to fail, we just fail to plan. And this allows people to open up the gates to what can be and how can I prevent this from happening again.
So in recent times, we see it all over social media and just like online discussions. More communities of color are discussing generational wealth. Can you just explain, or for anyone who doesn't know, what generational wealth is?
Yes. So I believe that people are ready for change. And generational wealth, in essence, is being able to accumulate wealth during your generation, and build wealth, and being able to pass that on to the next generation. And really, you want to do it within multiple generations, not just one, right? Like the Rockefellers, they have they've been able to pass on generational wealth for 18 generations now, which is extremely impressive. So what we want to do is be able to um, pick up the skill set, financial literacy, to be able to position ourselves to build wealth. And I believe that more people are ready to have these conversations.
So I know it won't be easy, but how can Black and Brown communities even begin to, try to achieve generational wealth?
Well, first things first is before you're able to help anybody else, you need to help yourself. So you need to get financially educated. Financial education is key to everything because that would allow you to understand what stocks investments are, investing in real estate, building a business that you can then pass on. Um, Investing in your child's education is key. Investing in life insurance, right? Life insurance, a lot of people don't know this, but life insurance is the most affordable way to pass on generational wealth, especially within our communities. But it really starts with financial literacy.
So I kind of want to shift a little bit over to home ownership. When it comes to home ownership, District 13, which consists of neighborhoods like Kingsbridge in the Bronx and Washington Heights in Upper Manhattan, have the lowest percentage of home ownership at just 4.2%. Could this be a link to the lack of wealth in these communities?
Yes, so the 4.2 percentage that you're referring to, it's mainly pertaining to the home ownership in the Hispanic community. Interesting enough, overall in Congressional District 13, they're at a 10%, which is actually the second lowest compared to Congressional District number 15. Um, so in reality, what we do see is that there is a huge proportion to the people that are investing in home ownership or getting ready for that. It has a lot to do with their income, right? So if we see that there's a huge correlation to how much you earn and and how are you willing to invest in a home. So you need to be prepared for that, but it all comes down to the educational piece and how can people feel ready for that investment because it's set to be one of the biggest investments of your life, and what can you do to make sure that once you have it you are in a position to be able to pass it on as well.
So that kind of leads a little bit into like my next question about like what does a higher percentage of home ownership indicate about a neighborhood? I also would just like to know, is it truly important when you're thinking about generational wealth?
Yes. Of course, we see home ownership as one of the many ways to build generational wealth, but for many people, is more about chasing the American dream. And when you chase the American dream, you're talking about a home and the white fence, right? But we do see that there's a huge correlation between how much you earn and the average income of these districts will determine a higher home ownership in those districts. So if we're able to provide people with the resources on how to become more financially aware of their situation and also how to increase their sources of income so they have more money to then make these investments in the future.
So I would like to kind of go back to a little bit talking about, just people of color, specifically Black and Brown people, since we experience this the most. Do you think, there's a lack of educators of color in this field? And could there be any mistrust because of that?
Yeah, so I do believe that there's a huge lack when it comes to financial educators, specifically of color. I believe that because of this, it brings people, you can relate to someone that looks like you, right? So I've had this experience myself getting into the industry. The average financial advisor, financial professional it's a Caucasian male. And that also goes to show that we need more people that look like us having these conversations so people can just say, well, this conversation is only for the rich. This conversation is only for the wealthy, when in reality, it's a conversation for everybody. But people need to see more people like us having these conversations so they can open up and trust us in the process.
So I love that you mentioned that it's a conversation. I know that a lot of younger people, maybe millennials, are having this conversation. But how can we make this a multi-general conversation where we're adding in our parents and our grandparents?
This is so interesting because of course, where you are in life, in regards to getting prepared for a home or having kids or retirement, college, etc. All these things play a picture in your perspective on finance, right? So in reality is having the proper resources that can relate to that individual in their stage of life. But I do believe that it just starts someone in the family. Like for my household, it started with me, right? I saw that there was a huge disparity, and I know that I had to do something about it. And because of that, I opened up the conversation in my household, because finance or money was that this taboo conversation, but it is changing that it's now okay to have these conversations. So we need to make it a norm in our household across everyone, really, and being able to make it more of a norm allows people to open up more often.
And that kind of leads me to my next question. I know that sometimes, you may walk past a building, you have no idea what it is, and they're having classes for financial literacy. And sometimes people maybe are afraid or they just don't take that step. What are some ways we can encourage low income communities of color to actually get more involved when it comes to being financially literate?
Yes, so I'm a big believer in resources, and especially things like financial education. To me, is it should be a priority and not an option. That's why what we do here with our campaign, we offer free financial webinars, whether it's in person or online. Majority of our classes are still online right now, so it makes it easier for people to plug in and be exposed to this information that it really impacts them in so many ways. So I believe that for some people, yes, they still hesitate because nobody wants to be put out there. But when you're able to make it so accessible for them and allowing them to have or read the resources and the downloads and things like that at their own time, it makes it takes them away from the spotlight and allows them to do it on their own time.
All right, perfect. Thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome. Take care.
We'll be right back with more Open BXRX Tuesday.